It started with a flag, not a threatening one, not an obscene one, not a flag with a message that would make a decent person clutch their pearls, just a front yard flag, mounted cleanly on a short pole beside a porch, the kind you see on quiet American streets every day. But when Marcus Reed put his up, the HOA acted like he'd planted a bomb. They didn't say that out loud, of course. They said policy. They said community standards. They said uniform appearance. And then they said the part that always shows the truth if you listen closely. They said, "We're just trying to keep things from getting political." Marcus read that sentence twice, standing in his doorway with the letter in his hand, and he felt a strange, familiar heat behind his ribs. Because the flag wasn't political. It was personal. Marcus Reed was a black veteran, 46, broad-shouldered in that quiet way, like he'd spent years learning how to carry weight without looking like he was carrying it. He walked with a slight stiffness in his left knee, a souvenir from a deployment he rarely talked about. He lived in a planned community outside a mid-sized southern city, the kind of place with manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and an HOA newsletter that somehow managed to sound like a sermon even when it was reminding you to trim your hedges. Marcus moved there for one reason: stability. After the service, after the job hopping, after the stretch where he felt like he was living in a fog made of paperwork and silence, he wanted something simple: a mortgage, a yard, a place where his daughter could ride her bike without him feeling like the world was always one loud noise away from going sideways. He'd bought the house 2 years earlier. He kept his lawn neat. He paid his dues on time. He never played loud music. He waved at neighbors. He did everything you're supposed to do when you're the only black guy on a street full of "we're friendly" smiles. Most days, it worked. Until the flag. It wasn't huge. It wasn't flapping like a billboard. It was a small, respectful tribute flag. One of those black and white designs honoring fallen service members, with a single stripe and a simple emblem. The kind of thing veterans recognize instantly. Marcus put it up the week before Memorial Day. Not as a statement, as a promise. He'd lost friends, names that still hit him like a punch when he heard them in the wrong moment. He didn't talk about it much, because he'd learned that the average person either gets uncomfortable or gets weirdly excited, like war is a movie and they're asking for spoilers. But the flag helped him hold the memory in a way that didn't spill all over the rest of his life. He stood back when he finished installing it, wiped his hands on his jeans, and felt, for the first time in a while, like his home was truly his. The next morning, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He didn't pick up. An hour later, there was an email. Subject line: "Notice of violation. Exterior display." Marcus clicked it. The HOA was informing him that his flag was not an approved decorative element and needed to be removed within 48 hours. If he failed to comply, fines would begin accruing daily. At first, Marcus thought it had to be a mistake. The community had flags everywhere. He could name them without even looking. The American flag on the corner house, the college flag 2 doors down. The seasonal flags, pumpkins in October, shamrocks in March, a big glittery welcome sign that technically counted as a display. His next-door neighbor, a retiree named Gary, had a flag that said, "Don't tread on me," hanging in his garage like a family heirloom. But Marcus's flag, quiet, small, respectful, was suddenly a threat to the neighborhood's uniform appearance. Marcus forwarded the email to the HOA manager and wrote back politely. He explained what the flag represented. He referenced the HOA's own bylaws, which allowed national flags and patriotic displays. He asked for clarification because he assumed this could be resolved like adults. He hit send. Then he waited. The response came fast, and it wasn't friendly. The HOA manager wrote that the board had reviewed the matter and determined Marcus's flag was not an official national flag, and therefore did not qualify. It was described as a message flag. Message flag. Marcus stared at the words and laughed once, short and bitter. In America, everything a black man does gets classified as a message. He wrote again, still calm. He asked why the college flags were allowed, why the holiday flags were allowed, why the Don't Tread flag was allowed, why a military tribute flag was being treated like graffiti. The manager replied with the kind of sentence that's supposed to end a conversation. Other flags have been approved or grandfathered in. Grandfathered. Marcus walked outside and looked down the street. There it was, a bright blue flag with a sports logo hanging from a porch railing, crisp as a billboard. Grandfathered my ass. He took photos. He made a folder on his laptop and titled it simply, Flags. Then he did what veterans do when they smell a bad process. He started documenting everything. The next violation notice arrived 2 days later, this one printed and taped to his door in a plastic sleeve, like he was being served in a movie. Final warning, it said. His daughter Ava found it first. She was 13, old enough to understand the world, young enough to still believe the world should behave. "What did you do?" she asked, eyes wide. Marcus swallowed the anger that wanted to come out too loud. "Nothing," he said. "I put up a flag." "A flag?" she repeated, confused. "Like a normal flag?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "A normal flag." Ava stared at the paper, then up at him. "That's stupid." Marcus almost smiled. "It is." That evening, he attended the HOA board meeting. He didn't want to. HOA meetings have a particular energy, small power in a small room, people treating garden mulch like it's national security. But he went. He wore a clean polo shirt. He brought printed photos of the other flags in the neighborhood. He bought a copy of the bylaws, highlighted in yellow. He sat in the back until his name was called. A white woman with a tight smile, HOA president, Diane, looked up at him like she was preparing to correct a child. "Mr. Reed," she said, "we're here to maintain community harmony." Marcus stood. "I want to understand how harmony works," he said, "because I'm looking at these flags, college flags, sports flags, seasonal flags, a political flag." Diane cut him off. "We don't allow political flags." Marcus lifted one photo. "Then why is that one still up?" Diane glanced at it, then looked away quickly. "That's not on the agenda." Marcus felt the room tighten. People hate when you bring receipts. He stayed calm. "My flag honors fallen service members," he said. "It's not political, it's not offensive, it's respectful. So what, exactly, is the violation?" A board member, a white man with a red face and the kind of voice that loved the word rules, said, "It's not the American flag. The covenants are specific." Marcus opened the bylaws and pointed. "It says patriotic display. It doesn't say only the American flag." The man waved his hand. "Our interpretation is final." Interpretation. That's the other word people use when they want power without accountability. Marcus looked around the room. He saw neighbors he'd waved at for 2 years, staring at their laps, like it was suddenly very important to study their own shoes. He said, "If you're going to ban my flag, then you need to ban the other flags too. Otherwise, you're not enforcing standards. You're enforcing preference." Diane's smile hardened. "Mr. Reed, we will not be threatened." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You're not being threatened," he said. "You're being asked to be fair." The meeting ended with no decision, just that same calm, icy sentence. "The board will take it under advisement." 2 days later, the fines started. $25 a day, then $50, then a letter warning about further action, including a lien. A lien. A word that turns a homeowner's stomach into water. Marcus's hands shook the first time he read it, not because he was scared of them, because he recognized the tactic: make compliance cheaper than resistance. He considered taking the flag down, just to protect his daughter, just to avoid the stress. And then he walked down the street, past the flags that were grandfathered, and he felt the anger settle into something steadier. If he took it down, the lesson would be simple: that even in his own yard, he wasn't allowed to be seen. He called a lawyer, not a billboard lawyer, not an ambulance chaser. A civil rights attorney who also handled HOA disputes. A woman named Kathleen Morris, who sounded like she'd been tired of nonsense for 20 years. Kathleen asked Marcus 2 questions. "Is it displayed on your property?" "Yes." "Are there other flags in the neighborhood?" "Yes." Then she asked the 3rd question, the one that mattered. "Have they enforced those flags the way they're enforcing yours?" Marcus laughed once. "No," he said. "Not even close." Kathleen told him to send everything: the photos, the notices, the emails, the bylaws. Marcus did. Kathleen called back the next day. She said, "They're about to learn a lesson." Kathleen filed a demand letter first. It was polite but sharp. It cited the bylaws. It cited state HOA law about selective enforcement. It cited federal protections about displaying the American flag, and then it made a simple argument. Even if Marcus's flag wasn't technically the American flag, the HOA could not apply its rules unevenly, especially when the unevenness fell along lines that looked suspiciously like race and comfort. The HOA responded with a new kind of arrogance. They said they were uniformly enforcing the rules. Kathleen asked for the violation notices issued to other homeowners with flags. The HOA did not provide them, because they didn't exist. Then, the HOA escalated. They sent Marcus a letter saying the fines had reached a threshold and the board would consider legal action to remove the violation and recover costs. Marcus read it twice, then handed it to Kathleen. Kathleen said, "Good. Now we stop playing HOA games." She filed in federal court. Marcus didn't even realize that was possible until Kathleen explained it. Federal court doesn't love HOAs pretending they're governments, she said, and federal judges don't like selective enforcement dressed up as standards. The HOA's attorney responded with the predictable tone: dismiss, minimize, pretend. They claimed the case was a private community matter. They claimed Marcus was mischaracterizing the rules. They claimed his flag was controversial. Controversial. A tribute flag. Marcus wanted to shout. Kathleen told him to stay calm and let the paperwork do its work. Depositions started. Emails were subpoenaed. And that's where the HOA made its first real mistake. Because behind closed doors, people say the part they never put in official notices. One email from a board member said, "If we allow this, we'll have all sorts of statements in yards." Another said, "We need to keep the neighborhood from turning into that kind of place." That kind of place. Kathleen underlined that phrase in red like it was a confession. Then came the hearing. A federal judge. A real courtroom. Not the HOA meeting room with folding chairs and ego. Marcus wore a suit that felt slightly stiff. Ava sat behind him in a simple dress, looking smaller than she had any right to look, as if the building itself was trying to intimidate her. Kathleen stood at the table and spoke clearly. She explained the flag. She explained the notices. She explained the fines. She showed photos of other flags, sports, colleges, political slogans, still flying happily, while Marcus's tribute flag was treated like an infection. The HOA's attorney argued that those other flags were different and that the board had discretion. Discretion. The judge listened, expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward and asked a question that made the entire room change temperature. He said, "Counsel, I have a simple question." The HOA attorney nodded, ready. The judge said, "If your position is that flags outside of the American flag are prohibited, why are there other flags throughout this neighborhood?" A pause. The HOA attorney began to speak about grandfathering. The judge held up a hand. "Grandfathered is not a magic word," he said. "It means there is a factual basis for a different treatment. Where's the record of enforcement? Where are the notices?" The HOA attorney's mouth opened, then closed. The judge turned to the HOA board members sitting behind their counsel. He said, "Do you have a list of approved flags?" Diane, the HOA president, looked startled. She wasn't used to being asked direct questions in rooms that mattered. She shook her head. The judge said, "So the board decides case by case?" The HOA attorney tried to rescue it. "The board uses discretion to maintain—" The judge interrupted. "Discretion without standards is selective enforcement." Then he asked the question Marcus would never forget. He said, "Why is this flag the one that triggered enforcement?" Silence. Not polite silence. The kind of silence that happens when the truth is sitting in the middle of the room and nobody wants to touch it. Kathleen didn't say racism out loud. She didn't need to. She simply put up another photo on the screen. A political flag 2 doors down from Marcus. Still up. The judge looked at it. Then he looked back at the HOA attorney. "And that one?" he asked. The attorney's face tightened. "That one was not reported." The judge blinked slowly. "So your enforcement is complaint-driven," he said. "Meaning a neighbor can decide which rules matter." The judge leaned back in his chair and his voice turned colder. "That is not a neutral system." Marcus felt Ava shift behind him. Kathleen asked the court for an injunction to stop the fines and prevent retaliation. The judge granted it. Right there. No more fines, no lien threat, no further action while the case proceeded. Marcus exhaled so hard he didn't realize he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Outside the courthouse, the HOA board avoided eye contact. Diane walked quickly, as if speed could erase what had just happened, but the story didn't stay in that hallway. It got out. Local news picked it up because it had all the ingredients: HOA drama, veteran, court, and the question people love the most. Why him? A reporter filmed the neighborhood and, by accident, did the funniest thing possible. They panned over porch after porch, flags everywhere. Sports, holidays, political slogans, welcome banners, and then they stopped on Marcus's small tribute flag, the one the HOA said threatened uniform appearance. It looked, on camera, like the quietest thing on the street. The HOA tried to spin it. They released a statement about misunderstandings and moving forward. The judge did not care about moving forward until the past was explained. Discovery continued. More emails surfaced. One board member complained that Marcus's flag felt aggressive. Aggressive. Kathleen printed that email and put it in a binder as if it were evidence in a murder trial. Because in a way, it was. It was evidence of how some people talk about black men when they want to sound reasonable while saying something unreasonable. When the final hearing arrived, the courtroom was fuller. Veterans came, some in uniforms, some in old jackets with patches. They didn't speak. They just sat behind Marcus like a wall. Ava sat with them, chin lifted. The HOA attorney looked smaller now. The judge issued his ruling with the calm clarity of someone who didn't like wasting time. He found that the HOA had engaged in selective enforcement. He noted the absence of consistent standards. He noted the complaint-driven nature of enforcement. He ordered the HOA to stop fines, stop threats, and update its policies with clear, neutral criteria. And then he did one more thing. He ordered the HOA to reimburse Marcus's legal fees. That part hit Diane like a slap. Because HOAs love spending homeowners' money on control until the bill comes due for their own behavior. Afterward, the HOA sent Marcus a letter saying they were resolving the matter. They didn't apologize. They never do, not cleanly, but they did something more revealing. Within 2 weeks, those other flags that were grandfathered began disappearing from porches, not because people suddenly loved uniformity, because the HOA didn't want the judge's question asked again. Why his flag? Marcus kept his up. He didn't enlarge it. He didn't add more. He didn't turn it into a spectacle. He just left it there, steady. One evening, Gary from next door walked over, hands in his pockets, and stood awkwardly near the property line. Gary cleared his throat. "I didn't know they were doing all that," Gary said. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak kindly. Gary looked at the flag. "My brother served," he said, quietly. I get it." Marcus waited. Gary hesitated, then said, "I should have said something." Marcus felt the anger soften slightly, not into forgiveness, but into something useful. "Next time," Marcus said. "Say it sooner." Gary nodded. Then he walked away. That night, Ava stood on the porch with Marcus and looked at the flag fluttering lightly. "Is it over?" she asked. Marcus thought about the emails, the meetings, the fines, the courtroom. He thought about the judge's face when he asked about the other flags, like he couldn't believe adults were acting this childish with someone's home and someone's honor. Marcus said, "This part is." Ava looked up at him. "Why did they pick us?" Marcus stared out at the street. He could have lied, could have said it was random, could have said people are just strict. But Ava was 13. She deserved the truth. "They didn't like being reminded we're here," Marcus said softly, "and that this is ours too." Ava nodded slowly, absorbing it the way kids do, quietly, painfully. Then she said something that made Marcus's throat tighten. She said, "I'm glad you didn't take it down." Marcus swallowed. Me too, he said, because that flag wasn't just cloth. It was a line, a small, respectful line in a front yard that said, "You don't get to decide what my service means. You don't get to decide what my home allows. You don't get to hide bias behind standards when the whole street is waving something until it's mine." And if a federal judge had to ask the obvious question to make the neighborhood see it, fine. Let him ask. Let the courtroom hear the silence after. Sometimes, that's where the truth lives. In the moment when someone in power looks around and says, plainly, "Why are there other flags?" But his is the one you banned.